everyone, and welcome to Life After the Military, a show completely focused on veterans transitioning from military to civilian life. Our show is powered by Pivotal Moments Media, an organization on a mission to strengthen mental fitness for all. Go check them out at pivotalmoments.org to learn more. My name is Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Howie Cohen, and we are privileged to have Navy Captain Retired Stephen Jordon with us today. Stephen is a veteran of 30-plus years of military service as an officer in the U.S. Navy, where he served as a naval helicopter pilot and flew over 4,000 hours in 8 different aircraft and survived more than 1,000 shipboard landings. After retiring from the military, Steve served as the executive director of the Northern Virginia Technology Council's Veterans Employment Initiative. After 4 years, Steve took his current position as the executive director of the Veterans Consortium Pro Bono program. Steve earned a BS degree in biology and environmental studies from Tulane University and a Master of the Arts in National Security Studies from the Naval War College. He was a fellow at the Daniel K. Inouye Asian Pacific Center for Security Studies and Political and Military Affairs Subspecialist. I'm sorry, Inouye. We did practice that before the episode. Steve holds a certificate in nonprofit management. Steve, it's so great to have you here. I really can't wait to talk to you about your experiences. Welcome to Life After the Military.
Well, thanks, Lee. And again, as I kind of said before in our intro, to be here with a couple of podcast legends is I'm honored, and I'm really to be able to share my transition story and have it hopefully connect with someone out there. Even if it's one person, it's that's certainly worth it. So I'm delighted to be here.
Well, that is the mission. And I always said, I'm not a legend until someone says it. So Howie, we have officially gotten to that stratosphere of legendary status. So no, I really appreciate that, Steve. And it means a lot. I agree with you. You know, that's the whole value of the show. One person, 1,000 people, it doesn't matter if it's helping someone through a tough time or helping someone transition or a spouse or a family. That is the goal from our end. So Steve, let's jump right into it. You had an exceptional 30-year career as an officer in the U.S. Navy. Share with the audience some of the things you did during your service and how those experiences shaped and molded you into the person that you are today.
Well, I'm a product of where I came from. So my grandfather was in World War II, and he is buried in American Military Cemetery in Belgium. My mom's father, she married my father, who was a career Air Force pilot for about 25 years, and he served in Vietnam as a combat search and rescue pilot. As I was in my father's last tour at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, and when I was at Muscuda High School, a little farm town right outside of the base, and I was trying to, I get kind of that transition theme. So what did I want to do? I applied for the Air Force Academy, which seemed to be the right thing to do, and my father was pretty happy about that. I didn't get into the academy. I got into the Air Force Academy prep school, and for me, the choice was I really didn't want to go to college for 5 years. So I had my bags packed for another university down in Florida. And then somewhere along the line, I guess I had applied for a Navy ROTC scholarship. Well, it turns out I got that kind of late. And so with that, as you mentioned, off to Tulane University on a Navy scholarship, and it was, to go to school in New Orleans is an education unto itself. But we had a fantastic Navy ROTC unit. It's combined Navy and Marine Corps, some great leadership, and I'm still close to those. I was class of 81, but the classes of 80 and 81 are. That really started my sense of what being a part of a team was. And I played high school sports, but I think it takes it to another level, even though we were just students at the time and doing our summer military training. You know, that bond that started then, that started to resonate with me. So that feel of, maybe this is what I want to do. Still not sure. So I was a bit of a free spirit at Tulane, played lacrosse, which in itself is kind of a free-spirited sport. And so my advisor said, you know what, Jordan, you probably ought to go be an Airedale. You seem like you have that kind of fit. So off to Pensacola, and as things worked out, the Navy gives you it where you go in your community. It's always the needs of the military is number one, two, your performance, and three, your desires. And it's certainly in that order. And so somewhere along the line, and we won't go into my flight school grades, but it was helicopters for me, and that turned out to be just a great fit. Now, still at this point, I'm not sure. I think my sense was that I'm just going to do my obligation in the military. So with flight school, it was around 6 years after commissioning. But I really wasn't too worried about that. So I had a very non-standard, but what all my fellow squadron mates would call kind of a dream aviation career, in that I was in a cockpit for the majority of my first 20 years of service in some way, shape, or form, and every tour was different. I think that's somewhere along the line, that was the hook, that where I wasn't sure what I would do besides the Navy if I got out, because what else could be so fun, challenging, and at the end of the day, it's all about the people, right? So surrounded by like-minded squadron mates that really love aviation, love seeing the world and the challenges. Somewhere along the line, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, made the decision that this is what I wanted to do. In the Navy, you're either a West Coast sailor or an East Coast sailor. West Coast is the best coast. So off I went, San Diego, a couple of tours in Hawaii, a lot of time in Japan. I flew I spent a couple of years in Maine as search and rescue pilot. And I will say there's nothing better than to be in an orange and white helicopter that says rescue on the bottom, because you are everyone's friend, and you can take a few liberties there with your flying in the backwoods of Maine. But then after a transition and then to the fleet, so I was a little bit senior when I got to the fleet, and I flew the venerable SH-2F Sea Sprite. So that's it's a little kind of a sports car of a helicopter. It's geared towards the back of small boys, as you call them in the Navy, cruisers, frigates, destroyers, a single spot ship. And I was single in Hawaii, and as soon as they said go to sea, I raised my hand and off I went. And it was and now I'll probably say that was the tour that really set me on the course to say I can't imagine doing anything more fun and more challenging than this. So to fly a helicopter onto the back of ships, good weather, bad weather, day, night, it was both challenging and fun. And the Navy carted me around the world in those days. And now we're in the mid to late 80s. We're in the kind of the cusp of the Cold War coming to a head at some point. And so the opportunities to do some intel work off the coast of Russia and in those tight waters, that really, kind of set my mettle for the kinds of things operationally that we could do, to go to all those great countries in the Western Pacific. It was just a dream tour. And then really that kind of leveraged my career going forward. I wanted to stay in the cockpit. I got an opportunity to fly with the Brits on exchange off their carrier, the Ark Royal. In fact, I did what we called Operation Desert Storm, what they called Operation Granby, off the back of the Ark Royal there in the early 90s. I then transitioned back to Hawaii to the Navy had transitioned the H-2 Sea Sprite to the SH-60 Bravo. That's it behind me there. Really a quantum leap in technology and warfighting, either anti-surface or subsurface. Went back to the same squadron as we were transitioning to the new model, and then spent a lot of time in the Gulf at that point. So through that first about 10 years, it was just strapping on a helicopter, wearing a flight suit every day, and that's just what I wanted to do. And I think for folks joining the military, men, women, I've got nephews and friends of my sons, and so my mantra to them is just go out, see the world, have fun. Don't stay home based if you can, particularly if you're unattached and single. Really get out there and be as operational and and get all you can out of the military. And I think particularly from the adventure side, I think that's really what we want our youth, our junior leaders doing.
Well, and Steve, you did it for the better part of 30 years, which was which is incredible, and thank you for all you did. Now you decided to retire in 2012, and so what I'd like to do is shift now to your transition to life after the military. You know, I'd love for you to kind of describe for our audience how you prepared for your transition. Please feel free to discuss not only what went well, but if anything did not go well, let's talk about that. You know, how can you, I'd love for you to just share anything you can with folks that they can learn from, and looking back on it, what would you do differently, knowing what you know now, if you had it to do over again?
Yeah, well, in fact, in some respects, I think you do it over again, and you get smarter every time you job shift, you job change. I think you're always looking for maybe not the next opportunity, but what else could I do? And I learned a lot of lessons. The Navy, post my operational side, I was able to get into the diplomatic side of the Navy. So I served on the NATO staff, representing the flag on a thing called the Maritime Standardization Board. And then my final tour was in Canada as the naval attaché when I retired in 2012. And that gave me, those couple of tours gave me a lot of time to think about something very different than the operational side of the Navy. It showed me what networking was really part of the job with our international partners, particularly at NATO headquarters in Brussels, and in Canada. I was also exposed to one of the defense contracting sides, not only being the U.S. Navy's representative to Canada, but all those mill-to-mill kinds of activities and selling different defense articles to Canada. So I got a chance to observe that. And what I will say is, over 3.5 years of my final tour, I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do. I was an abject failure in coming up with an answer to that. And so I had, when the tour was done or was closing down, we took a family vote, and 3 boys and a great wife that had followed me around for the better part of 2+ decades. And I said, okay, I'm happy to do and go wherever you all would like me. I know I can find a job. Not quite sure what that is, but whether we wanted to go to Europe or back out to California where we have a home, or stay in the DC area, or we loved Canada. I was quite happy to explore that. Well, the family wanted to, with me abstaining, wanted to return back to the Northern Virginia area, the DC suburbs. I had a rising junior in high school and a freshman, and then somebody in grade school. We had our house. That was an easy physical transition back to an area. We just moved back into our house, reestablished ourselves for the 3rd time in our neighborhood with our schools and churches. And then I took a year off, and I was by design, and I was really, really glad that I did. It was a long career, and we'll talk about some other life challenges that we had as a family later on. But it was very nice in that it was a simple transition. My boys reaffiliated with their schools and sports teams, and then I coached every sport under the sun. I did things in Boy Scouts as an adult leader. I rode bikes with my little guy to elementary school every day. And so for a year, I really, particularly in hindsight, that was a great thing to do. Now, also during this time, to get back to the transition piece, is, all right, well, still, it's on. I'm not ready to retire. I tell you, I can validate that you, even as a retired 06, that's not a good enough income in the Washington, D.C. area to sit back on your laurels as you're trying to punch kids out to their college of choice and those kinds of things. So I tried that on for a year. It was never the plan, but I'm here to tell you, I knew there was, from an income level, I knew I needed to do something. But then I really wanted to do something that I wanted to do. I was very fortunate in the Navy, and I tended to get the orders that I wanted. I was a bit of a squeaky wheel when that came up, that process came up. And so I wanted to really now it was 100% my own, what I wanted to do. So the year turned into a little bit longer, but then I kind of did the reverse planning. I said, okay, what don't I want to do? Okay, I know in no way, shape, or form did I want to return to the Pentagon. I did a staff tour there, fascinating, educational. 2 years was quite enough of that. You know, when everything on your to-do list is hot and a priority one, again, glad to get that on-the-job master's degree from the Pentagon, but didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go into defense contracting and be a program manager of a thing or a program. I wanted something a little broader than that. And so as I started to push things aside, what became apparent to me was I missed the camaraderie of being with now veterans on a daily basis and serving. And so with some kind of on the ground work with a small nonprofit that my wife and I run, that really set the seed to that maybe this is the field that I'd like to go into. Obviously with my background, veteran and military, I wanted that to be the core. And so that's where I launched. So really it was the process of shedding what I didn't want to do, and then what I turned out that I did do kind of became apparent to me. So then it was, okay, how do I get after it? I now know I want to enter the nonprofit world as a professional, and where do I go to get a network that I didn't have or plug into a network? And so you start where we all do with our connections and our friends. And I'm unafraid to ask questions and meet people. I think the military really helped me out on that, particularly the attaché and NATO tours. What that was all about was not just meeting people, but trying to make a connection and then to some degree from a business point, leverage that connection in a sincere way to kind of get going where you want to go. So I had a great false start, which was really educational for me. I went to a job fair put on by the USO. It was at Fort Belvoir. And I walked around with my resume now. I'm now at that year plus where it's time to put on a suit and cut my hair and go. And I really nothing fit. So I happened to be near the coordinator's table at the USO. And she said, well, what would you like to do? And I said, well, really, I'd like to work for your organization as the sponsor. She goes, well, as a matter of fact, we have an open position. And they were not part of the job fair. They were just kind of at the overall coordinator's table. Well, I gave her my resume. She called me back. It turns out that she was the HR director for corporate USO. I had a phone interview, my first phone interview ever, which went well enough that they invited me in for a face-to-face interview. I returned in about a week later, and I'm face-to-face with now the hiring manager or the HR director that I've met. And she asked me all those questions that what's your biggest weakness? What do your friends think your weaknesses are? What are your strengths? I just completely locked up. It was the worst interview ever. I had a couple of interviews since then. I didn't get the job. And what a great choice by them. I wouldn't have hired me with that performance. And I think I was ill prepared I had not done mock interviews. I had not done info interviews. I just thought my resume and chatting was going to carry me through. And in the corporate sense, that didn't do it. I did find out that I discovered I had a gap in my resume. I did not have any kind of certification in nonprofit management. So I went to the local community college, signed up for a certificate program, got that piece of paper. That really fleshed out my resume. But now, a long answer to your question, the best thing that I did, and it took about 6 months, is I had 100 cups of coffee. And so that was my plan, is that I was going to treat anyone that I thought could inform me about the nonprofit space, the veteran space, the military space. I was going to buy them a cup of coffee at Starbucks, right? There's 2 coffees, 50 meetings, there's 100 cups of coffees. And I broadened my network. Nobody ever said no to my request. And I walked away each and every time with at least 2 warmed up kind of, you need to talk to this person and I'll send the email on your behalf. And it was fantastic. And I became smarter and I built my network specific to where I wanted to go. And that in the end, that network found me the opportunity of a recently opened position at the Northern Virginia Technology Council and a new program they had established, the Veterans Employment Initiative. And I interviewed for that. Now my interview skills were fairly well polished at this point because of the splendid failure that I had. All those informational interviews along the way really got me comfortable talking to the subject matter, and they hired me in 2015.
So, Steve, I want to tap on a few things that you said there, and Howie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, Steve, you're the first guest we've had that, typically we talk about the time period leading up to prepare for a transition, but not always the time period right after the transition. We've had a lot of guests that have, self-proclaimed, stopped on a Friday, started on a Monday with a new job, and how stressful that was. I don't remember ever having a guest that said, no, I took a whole year to think about that. And I think the point I want to make to the audience is, should you be financially in a position to do that? I think that's great advice. Take some time, let it set in, and find what you want. You basically made yourself a flight plan for the next part of your life. And again, like you said about the interview, I think that's a funny part. Just a quick tip for everybody. If anybody asks you what your greatest weakness is, that's one of those questions I always say. I said, the answer is, it's actually pretty standard if you know what to say. It's, look, I lack the experience to accomplish all of my goals, and I'm going to get it here. That's what I always tell people to say to that question. One quick follow-up that I have is and I want to tap on this. So I was fortunate enough in the time I was following my wife around in the Air Force. We did get stationed at Eglin Air Force Base, which is right next to Pensacola. Mm-hmm. And I got a little sprinkle of being around aviators and the Air Force and the Navy. And look, it is, especially if you're in a cockpit, it is a fast-paced, as you said, it is an always moving, almost pro sports level environment, right? In the sense it doesn't stop, right? So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how did you emotionally deal with that? Because I see this in athletes where when you stop playing professional sports, the lights are gone, the media is gone, the excitement's gone. It's just this really kind of big absentee place in your life. You see this in active duty military too. Like, how did you fill that void? Because you did start to talk about that a little bit. And I'm just curious because, again, you go from going 1,000 miles per hour, I mean, almost literally, to not, right? So how did you transition with that part of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm a helicopter guy, so it's more like about 250 miles an hour.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah,
I didn't think you were going Mach 3 or anything like that. Mach 2, whatever. Let's just say, yeah.
So the lifestyle, I think, of military members on deployment. So I come from a deployed generation of about the mid 80s through the initial stages of Operation Enduring Freedom as air boss on the Peleliu. That, with very few breaks, a couple years at the Pentagon, I had 1 year at Naval War College, but other than that, it was pretty much nonstop operational deployment. And I say that because there's nothing that I wanted to do more than to be in the middle of that, to be part of it, to be leading it. And so my exit from that with a couple of diplomatic tours, I think those were so different, and from the international exposure that kind of padded that exit. But during my year off, I will say I was a bit lost. I was doing what I wanted to do for my family and getting a lot of satisfaction from that. The process of figuring out what I wanted to do, knowing that I needed to land someplace, but I needed to land someplace that was right for me. And so how did I deal with that? And so all of us that are military connected, spouses, serving members, when we land and our friends and support people that are close to us are spread out all over creation, it takes a lot of effort, I think, to connect. It's certainly easier these days with all the different means of of video chat and texting and social media channels. But that was very important to me. I realized that my core group of supporters from my squadrons, some international folks that I had struck up rich friendships with. I just come from Canada. They were fantastic hosts, and I really had, just a great network of, you kind of grab 6 or 7 folks from each of your tour. So collectively, that's my personal support group beyond my family. And so I took a lot of effort with the time that I had now to really ensure that those relationships, some of them going back to high school, were kind of refreshed, reinforced, let folks know that the welcome mat was out in the DC area, which in itself is a great crossroads. Folks are always kind of passing through town, and I just let them know that I wanted to see them. So maybe one answer to your question, Lee, is that was to reconnect with folks that were important to me. A lot of it started off professional, but they became lifelong friends.
Right. And I think that's a great answer. And I'll tell you why, is because I think sometimes people feel they can't do that, or they just don't think to do that. And it's really the connections you make along the way. I mean, look, this is certainly true in the military. It's true in real life, outside of the military. I almost said real life. That is real life. But outside of the military as well, it's the people you meet. It's the people you do it with. Again, in sports, it's never the championships as much as it's the group you're doing it with. You miss the guys in the locker room. You miss the people you work with. So I think that's a great point, is that to kind of replace that, you kept those connections alive, understanding that. Another big thing you spoke about that I think is actually a really important point was you realized that the work you wanted to do was to continue to serve those that served. And I think that sometimes that eludes people when they're looking for jobs. There's this kind of preconceived notion, I have to get this job that is a job, right? And you turned it more inward. And I think not enough people do that. I actually want to help people that have been in this position. And again, we forget to do that. That's how I got involved with coaching coaches. I realized I had this passion for coaching. And so naturally I'm like, I got to coach teams, right? And I realized now I actually want to coach the coaches. And that was a real awakening moment for me. But as you alluded to earlier, in 2015, you took a position as the executive director of the Northern Virginia Technology Council's Veteran Employment Initiative. I want to make sure I said that right.
Mouthful.
Yeah. And you served in that role for 4 years. So why don't you share with our audience what you did there? And again, a little bit more about why you chose to work for that organization, as you alluded to.
Well, it was, as my network found me the opportunity, and so the Technology Council, they go by the moniker NVTC, is really on par for the East Coast, certainly with the Silicon Valleys, the Bostons, the Austins. So it's a tremendous tech trade association, and that is certainly a growth area for this region. If you look at the Amazons and the Amazon Web Services and the Facebooks and all the social media platforms, that growth area out by Dulles Airport is huge. And this has always been, I think we had WorldCom here. We've had a whole host of MCI had a global campus here, and that's grown to where it is now. So it's unbeknownst to me, really, it's a very rich tech environment with really no end in sight. So as these companies, as trade association is to support its membership by however they'd like to be supported, events, topic matters, business development issues. Well, when the program was started, a couple of years before, as it started in 2013, I came in about 2 years later. The unemployment rate at that time was very high, up towards 8-9%. And for veterans, now we are now in the midst, we're about the midpoint, maybe a little later of everything going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the folks getting out of the military, their path to employment was really challenging. So now we are looking at about 15 to 20% for post 9/11 veterans coming out. So that was the genesis of the program. It came from the member companies. They needed talent. Some very smart folks said, "Oh my gosh, well, if you need talent, the talent you need are folks that are trainable, that get a sense of mission, know that are results oriented. Failure is not an option kind of attitude." Well, that's all the folks that we train in the military. It doesn't matter. Junior enlisted staff NCOs for the Navy, the chiefs, the warrants, on and through senior officers. And so why aren't we as a technology community formally leveraging those? Not just companies putting it out on their job sites, but now let's have some assistance. So with that was born the Veterans Employment Initiative. It had a great partner in Monster.com, who also owns military.com. And they created a platform unique. It was called US Tech Vets. And so if you were essentially a technology company and a NVTC member, and at the time they had about 800 tech companies that were members, you could then post your site specifically and feed your Veterans Employment Initiative. Some of the big robust companies like Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin, you don't have to tell them how to hire veterans. They've got veterans hiring veterans. It's very mature. But for the small to mid-sized companies, you know, their senior recruiter could be their senior HR person and maybe their COO all wrapped up into one. So how do we assist those companies into help them with the tools to overcome the challenge of access to veterans? And so we built that out. The website was national in its scope. From a regional perspective, I connected with the state of Virginia and their Department of Veterans Services, all the bases in the DC area. And then we had an in-person component to that where we put on the bases, the Fort Belvoirs, the Myers, Henderson Halls, Andrews. We put on job fairs specifically and help get those recruiters through the gate, which is very challenging. You have to be sponsored. You have to be kind of have a way in there. And so we had both a virtual technology assisted way of doing it nationally, but then we also had some boots on the ground events. And that's, I was brought in to really grow it. So the concept was there, but how do we scale it? And so that was really what I was responsible for. And it could not have been done without corporate America leaning in, and then all those other supporters of the veteran spaces. So the other veteran service organizations, the military bases themselves, and those transition folks leaning in to assist. And it was the most remarkable, informal, teamwork-oriented organization that was ever knitted together that I've ever been a part of. And it was a real pleasure to be a part of that.
And Steve, and I want to make something kind of clear to our audience. So this isn't just, even though it's a Northern Virginia Technology Council, you still had a national reach. So folk and that capability still exists today. That organization still exists today, and they're still helping place veterans in technology jobs, not only in the Northern Virginia area, but nationally, anywhere across the United States, right?
That's correct. So if you are a veteran, or we expanded to the military spouses, is that during the course of my tenure there, as the realization that military spouses are underserved and underutilized for what they bring to the workforce, we capture that audience as well. So if you are a veteran, transition military member, military spouse, if you go to ustechvets.org, you can, it's got all the resume tools like any other kind of job site, career builder, the Monster component. But what Monster has done is they have tailored it to the military. You post your resume on, and then there are literally, I would say, over 1,000 recruiters actively sourcing talent specific to veteran talent, military spouse talent on that website. So as a resource to add on to anyone out there, I would say it's worth a look, particularly if you want to enter the tech workforce.
What a phenomenal resource, and I really appreciate your sharing that. I think that's something our audience, really needs to look into to take advantage and leverage that to help them with that transition to work after they depart from the military. So Steve, you as Lee said, you spent about 4.5 years there, and then you left the Veterans Employment Initiative and you went to work for the Veterans Consortium Pro Bono program, and you again serve as an executive director, and that's where you currently work today. What I'd like for you to now do is kind of talk about the mission and the focus of this current program you're in, and how you assist veterans with that organization.
Yeah, thanks, Howie. Yeah, so I'll for the transition again. It was an unexpected transition. So I was not looking for a new opportunity. I still felt I had some growth to lead the program. I had a fantastic boss in Bobby Kilberg, who she is an icon in the Washington D.C. area for she led the organization for about 20 years. But as she had announced her retirement, that just gave me pause. And almost simultaneously, my network made me aware of this opportunity. So it wasn't something I was looking for. A recruiting firm had reached out to a close friend who wasn't looking for an opportunity, who fed them my name. And literally about the time that he reached out to me and said, "Hey, oh, by the way, I've thrown your name towards this executive recruiter who's looking to fill this role as the ED with the Veterans Consortium." Literally, as we're having that exchange, the phone rings and there's the executive recruiter. So this is all within a 12-hour period.
Wow.
And so I had never heard of the Veterans Consortium. To be quite honest, you really don't get a sense of what the Veterans Consortium. So what does that do? And I was pretty well connected in the veteran space, certainly within the DC region, but then also nationally as well. And we also have this tagline. It's the pro bono program. So if you don't get that tagline right away, that pro bono, okay, I got it, legal. So we're doing some legal things here. So it was presented to me. What I really liked about it was, again, it was serving veterans and veterans in need. So where my previous job was serving veterans in the transition space, the Veterans Consortium pro bono program serves veterans from all generations based on financial need with their cases for VA disability. And it's the last stop. So a veteran in the VA can kind of go back and forth on their ratings or just their disability itself. But back in the 80s, before the 80s, the VA had the last say. Whatever they said went, and you really had no further recourse. Well, the Reagan administration had established, it didn't think that was fair, and established the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. So it's a federal court. There's now 9 judges. It's completely out. So it's in the U.S. judicial system outside of the VA. And so a veteran now can have a place to go to get an unbiased decision, if you will, on their VA disability claim. And so the consortium, it really was a consortium. So the roots are 4 organizations, veteran service organizations, and it was PVA, Paralyzed Veterans of America, DAV, the American Legion, and a NVLSP, National Veterans Legal Program. Were kind of cobbled together this program, and we're given some federal dollars to assist veterans, because even if a veteran went before a federal judge, the VA would come with all their suits and lawyers, and really they were outgunned. And so, how do we provide appropriate and competent legal representation for the veterans, particularly when it's based on financial need? And so, what we do at TVC is what we go by is we recruit, train, place cases with, and then mentor volunteer attorneys who give their services pro bono, hence pro bono program, to represent veterans in their cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for veteran claims. It was more of a federal. It was formal with a charter, but we really only established ourselves as a 501c3 non-IRS designated nonprofit in 2011. So only for the past 10 years we've existed now more formally as a nonprofit, as a .org, and we continue on that mission. And we've seen great growth in some of our other lanes where we support veterans seeking discharge upgrades from their other than honorable discharges, but if they have a nexus to a mental health issue from a bad behavior, but you can tie it to PTSD, TBI, military sexual trauma, well, then that's a case, and the military boards have signaled that they are now open to looking at that because of the mental health trauma really created that bad behavior or provided an environment where that bad behavior occurred, they're willing now to upgrade those. And now with that, these decisions are life changing because they're now able to go get VA benefits, particularly for their mental health issues. It has significance in seeking employment to wipe that away. And then lastly, we become kind of a test bed for some pilot programs through some fellowships who were assisting with military naturalization. So foreign military members that serve in our military, how do we assist them with their path to citizenship? And then lastly, we're really focused on the women veteran issues and how they as a community are underserved and have their own unique legal needs. So I came here because it was a growth opportunity. We have a fantastic staff of about 25 to 30, and we have a nationwide network of really over 6,000 lawyers that we've trained over our existence. And that to me that's the crown jewel, are those attorneys, some veterans, some not, some just, they have chosen our organization to give back. And that's really rewarding to be a part of this.
Steve, I know you've only been there a short time, but any significant cases come to mind of folks that you've helped, since you've been there, or maybe just prior to you getting there, that really stand out? I mean, this sounds like absolutely fascinating work and very rewarding work, and certainly there's a tremendous need for it. And any significant cases really stand out since you've been there?
Well, so I've been here getting close to 2 years. So some of these cases take particularly the discharge upgrade cases take a long time, and that resides in the service boards and the Board of Correctional and Military Records, and a lot of that has to do with volume. And what we've been told is because of the excellent staff work that we do, our volunteer attorneys do, that our cases are kind of picked out. So at both levels, discharge upgrade and the disability cases, we have about a 90% success rate, which is staggering. And so the cases that really, we have something on our social media called Good News Twos, and we'll grab a quote from one of our clients that has good things to say about the success of their case, and kind of push it out both in-house and then out on social media. And the cases that strike me are really those ones that probably Vietnam era, they've been fighting these cases literally for decades. In many cases, it's the surviving spouse, now that the military member has passed on, that they are now getting their day in court, so to speak. They're granted some of the monetary values are significant in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but really what's more significant is the feeling that justice has been done, and in particular when the member has passed on and the surviving spouse offers their gratitude, because we were the last place that they could go for success. So those kinds of stories to that other greatest generation that was really not recognized very much, that Vietnam era veterans, those are the ones that personally, I think maybe because of my father served during that time and we lived that life, that really pluck at my heartstrings.
And Steve, if someone has a need or knows someone who has a need, how would they seek the services of this organization?
Yeah. Like most things, we have broad social media. We have our website, vetsprobono.org, vetsprobono.org. I would say we're well connected. So within the legal community, both within law firms nationally, within the U.S. court system, we're pretty easy to find. And if you just Google vet legal needs, we'll pop up at the number one or two position. So again, we operate on, we don't say no to anyone. So if you're not a good fit, we will find a resource or something to assist you. So for discharge upgrade, we're really specific to our mental health lane, but if you've got some discharge upgrade issues that we can't help with, we will still give you information and really explain the process. And a lot of folks they have no understanding of the process itself. So if we can assist in just understanding how kind of fighting the VA for your disability works, we have the experts right here. So we'll take the time to give folks that education.
And so, Steve, it seems like you've made a lifetime of charitable work. So not only with the Veterans Employment Initiative, with the Veterans Consortium, but I noticed when I was doing a little research about you, I see that you helped found the Emma Jordon Kidz Fighting Cancer Foundation in 2009. And I know you currently serve there as the foundation's chairman. I really appreciate you taking some time to tell our audience about this organization, what it stands for, and what you're trying to accomplish with that work.
Yes. So during towards the latter part of my Navy career, so I was coming from Belgium to what was going to be probably my sunset tour, and I was selected to be an attaché. So attachés are trained in Washington D.C. And during the course of that, we have 4 children. My 5.5-year-old daughter Emma was diagnosed with a form of childhood cancer called a Wilms tumor. I was in chorus. I was supposed to be here for about 6 months, and I was actually heading to New Zealand. Well, basically for us, the world stopped rotating. We found ourselves spending a lot of time up at Walter Reed. That would be the old Walter Reed in DC. So through surgeries and radiation and chemotherapy and stem cell replacements, and really a battle of about a year and a half, we lost our daughter just after she turned 7 years old.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I will say that the sponsoring organizations, the Navy, the Defense Intelligence Agency, who kind of rides herd over the attaché community, they could not have been more supportive. I went on sabbatical twice, kind of from my coursework. So my 6-month tour turned into about 3 years, and I did the course half a time once, and then finish it up on another opportunity. And so, with her passing in 2008, and when 2009 came around, the Navy had asked me, what I wanted to do, and my wife and I felt that I could have retired. I could have gotten a job in DC. They were really just could not have been more supportive. And I would say our military gets it right for our families really more often than they don't. And we were surrounded by families up at Walter Reed whose children were undergoing that same kind of medical treatment. There's only 3 pediatric cancer military facilities in the U.S. Here, Norfolk, and up in Washington State, up at Madigan. And so with that, so right before we went to Canada, we thought it just seemed we could do more. Our community embraced us, our local community in Fairfax Station, Virginia, our schools, our churches, and it just seemed, my wife and I thought that it just seemed right to honor Emma and her life as a courageous little fighter, and no parent should ever have to bury their child, and knowing that the fight against pediatric cancer is underserved, underreported. Only 4% of the National Cancer Institute's massive budget goes towards pediatric cancer, even those are the people that have the most life years left. And really, pediatric cancer has just been dumbed down adult cancer treatments, which children's bodies are completely different. So in having lived this world, and my wife was an Army nurse and a pediatric specialist, and then a pediatric nurse practitioner. So she understood, and really, she was so important to me and carried me along for the medical part of this journey, and as well as the emotional support. So we decided to start a foundation just to build awareness and do what we could in a very grassroots way, just in our community. We did not want to become some of the Alex's Lemonade Stand, some of the well-known national organizations, and God bless them, those organizations in the St. Jude's of the world that do their work on a massive global scale. But we thought we could make a difference in our community. So here I am leading an organization for lawyers. I had not had much interaction with lawyers, so to speak, other than knowing a couple, but our neighbor across the street was a lawyer, and she helped guide us through forming a foundation, getting the right IRS, both in the state and nationally, certifications. And so what we do now is we raise whatever little money we can to support specifically a pediatric cancer research trial through the Children's Oncology Group at the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. And we've supported a specific trial because that's where the money really needs to go. And then we also support the cancer families up at Walter Reed, now the new Walter Reed in Bethesda, with just some monetary gift cards. It's challenging. They're on the road. Those families eat meals on the run. They're burning gas up to get treatments for their child. So just whatever we can do just to let those families know that we're thinking about them. So we've raised about $100,000 for our cancer research trials. We're very busy during the month of September, which is Pediatric Cancer Awareness Month. And I can't say enough about how our community has embraced our efforts through schools, churches, local communities. You can't go to our local giant and not see somebody in a gold colored T-shirt with our logo, gold being the awareness color for pediatric cancer. And then I will say, and sure, I'm on there as the chairman, and my wife and I are the co-founders, but it's really my wife, Elena, who does the heavy lifting for the foundation and makes those connections in our community and keeps them alive. I'm really kind of there for the heavy lifting. So thanks for allowing me to share that story. It's it always gives me pause in a positive way to think about my daughter, and I hope, but I know that she looks down on us, cheering us on with the work that we do for those like her and those families.
Yeah, Steve, one of the things about what you're talking about is there's nothing to fill that gap, I imagine. But like you said earlier in the episode, your mind, your family's mind turns towards helping others in that position. And again, I'm not going to try and even act like I understand what you've been through or your family's been through. That would be wrong. But I can applaud what you've done. And I think that echoing what we said earlier in the episode in a much more serious nature, your heart just turns to helping others in those times. And that's amazing. That's gracious. That's the top of humanity right there. And well, obviously nothing will replace the love and you have for your daughter and your daughter. I think that, and we're going to talk about mental strength in a moment. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that you were able to put yourself in a position, again, your whole family, to pursue something like that, because that's a level of pain I can't imagine. So, Steve, I will turn this into the last question. Is our parent company, Pivotal Moments, is all about strengthening mental fitness, and everyone struggles with it in some way or another in varying degrees. You just shared an incredible story of a time that you had to be mentally strong or be mentally fit in some form. How did you do that? I don't understand. How did you push yourself through that? You're still probably going through it, right? I understand there's an organization, but how did you manage it? What do you do to strengthen it daily? How do you stay moving forward with that when it comes to mental fitness in the face of adversity?
Well, I think, particularly my generation, Howie's generation, when you're out there on the front lines away from your family, and I'm an old school aviator at this point, but the way we dealt with everything, I think, of our generation was to compartmentalize, right? So mission first, no matter what. All right, you take care of your troops. Again, I married a great person who got that. That is, as my deployments got near, you could almost see a very myopic view of the world, that I needed to focus on mission, my people, my crew. I was going to be gone for 6 months, and I think that that mindset, that was the way that we dealt with things back in the day, right? So when I'm in the cockpit, nothing can really, I need to be there for my crew.
Right.
A bad landing is, that happens once and people die. So every landing has to be good, particularly when they get challenging. And I just think that's how I grew up in the military. I watched my father do it as a veteran, growing up as a kid and as a Vietnam veteran. And so I think what I'm, in many respects, that's how I've dealt with a lot of things in my life. What I will say is I look at the military now, and in Navy terms, there's been a huge sea change in how we deal with human factors before we hit the starter. So it's now a part of the brief. You talk about issues, life issues that might be challenging, and the bottom line is your head in the mission? Are there factors that we should pull you off of this training mission, this operational mission, because you're putting yourself, your equipment, and most importantly your crew at risk. There's so many more resources these days, and there was essentially none before, right? You didn't talk about mental health issues for fear that you would be, once you come out of the cockpit. I mean, the worst. You shared nothing with doctors or psychologists. The last thing, it's very easy for them to write you a down chit, as we call it, a medical down chit. It could have been sinuses or whatever. Oh, it's a pain in the tail to go get that up chit. You've got to see 2 or 3 people. It takes 3 days. So you shared really nothing about what was going on either in your body or in your head. I think now that stigma is removed. They've formally made human factors a part of the brief, the debrief. I think there's a needed deglamorization of alcohol in the military writ large. I think that's always been challenging, as that's usually been a tool to deal with stress, a very unhealthy tool. So with that broadly, I guess my comment on the military is we're in a much better place than we were in my generation or before. On a personal level, I think to go back to what I said before, what was very important to me was that network of lifelong friends, those close friends, beyond family. So as I got my wife and my kids, but who else that's like me can I talk to in confidence, shared experiences, shared mental health issues, shared physical health issues. I think that's, to have that support behind me and know that it's always there is key. So we talk about networking a lot and professionally, right? Who can kind of assist you with a resume review or mock interviews. I think my personal network, that's what I expect out of them. That's what they expect out of me, is that I'm going to be there for them, particularly on the challenging personal issues. And so that's again hard as a military person when your network is spread out, kind of globally. You're not in your hometown and everybody's there, but maybe that's a good thing as well. That now it's much easier to connect and know that the folks are still there.
Yeah, I think it's so important what you said about having a network, and and how I'm sure you can talk to this too. That's a lot of where the stigma comes in, is that fear of talking to people that might have like-minded or similar experiences, because we have an unprompted fear that it makes us look weak. And look, even I've dealt with that as a leader. You don't want to look or be perceived as weak, however you define that, to the people that you're leading, because there's lots of reasons why, right? Fear of being taken advantage of, or fear that they won't respond to you as a leader anymore, or fear that it will make you look, or they'll question your leadership, right? But the truth is, when you're in a bonded environment, or I should say a trusted environment with people that you can trust, that actually strengthens the relationship. It doesn't make it more strained. Nobody's perfect. And again, the one thing I'll say, Steve, to you is I agree with you that communication is better than it's ever been. I remember doing long distance phone calls as a kid. It was a big deal. We had to make a long distance phone call. And, like today, that doesn't exist. But at the same time, how much communication is too much communication? We have human highlight reels on social media with very little downside, right? Everything's a perfect little moment that you can share. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with sharing wonderful moments, but we can't let it dilute the fact that life is not like that all the time. And it's okay to not be okay. So I think it's a phenomenal answer. I do agree with you that the military, the armed forces is moving in the right direction, but I also think they have a long, long way to go. The acknowledgement is the first step for sure. And I think that, we're in a position now from an armed forces standpoint that there is some acknowledgement, not enough. And I think that podcasts like this and you sharing your story and people like Howie are going to push that mission to the next level, where it's understood on a deeper place that this is how you make a better human being. It doesn't have to be held in. Howie, you have any other thoughts on that? Because I still have my Post-it notes here of things I have to go over before we end.
Well, I'm just amazed by what you've dedicated a good portion of your adult life to, Steve, to be very honest and candid with you. I mean, obviously a stellar, exceptional military career, but what really has moved me is, and it started during your military career, is how much, and Lee talked about this, is how, your desire, your commitment, your focus to give back to others and help others overcome whatever challenges they may have, specifically the military, specifically families that are, and young children who are dealing with pediatric cancer. It is amazing to me how much you're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis to help others. And I just want to thank you for that. I'm really moved by the stories that you shared with us and the things that you've committed a good portion of your recent adult life to. I think it's just exceptional.
Well, thanks for saying that. What I'll return the compliment. So really, to have a platform for veterans or military spouses to tell it's not just a transition story. I mean, it's kind of, your podcast is teed up that way, but it's really, life for those that serve with and around the military. And I think we can all take a little bit of pieces, as I have, and as I've listened to your previous podcasts. I find that as an exceptional resource, for me personally, but then to also share. And there's always a nugget or two. Not everybody matches up and say, "Oh my gosh, that's a guy would like to just proceed forward in my life exactly the way that veteran did." Now, it never works that way, but there are nuggets of wisdom, and they've been there and done that, and now you have something to reflect upon. And so I think this particular podcast, this platform, is really invaluable, for one, to allow all of us to tell our stories, but more importantly, to share our stories. So thanks to both of you for being here and hearing my story today.
Oh, thanks, Steve. That means a lot. And, look, I'll tell you this for everybody listening. There's a lot of skills. There's a lot of trades. If you are a person, this is not even just limited to the military, you have a longing to help others. Now, Howie, you're like this. Steve, you're obviously like this. I'm like this. We're all very like-minded in this regard. Don't take that for granted, right? If you're a servant leader, or you're in a position where you really do want to reach out and help other people, that's a skill set on its own. It's a special skill set, just like someone who works with their hands, or someone that might be really good with technical skills. But you have to recognize that that's something you want to do. Because when you think about a job application, Steve, there's no checkbox. Do you care about other people? That's not something that comes up typically on the interview or in the prerequisites to get a job. So if Howie's like this, and like I said, I'm like it too. I have this, urge. I want to help people. I naturally want to do it. And by the way, if you don't have that urge, it's okay too. But if you do, that's something you should note when looking for jobs or a future for yourself, right? Because if you end up in a position where it's not based on that, it can be pretty detrimental. Now, to end this phenomenal episode, a little bit of an uptick, Steve, you've listened to the show, so you know that every guest gets a name of a book from me. All right. So
I know I've read the titles of your books. You have really long titles that you for your own personal book. So
right. So sometimes that's my doing. Sometimes that's the publisher
Okay.
knowing what they're doing. But I've been told I have a knack for coming up with titles for actually other people's books. My publisher wouldn't say that about my own books, believe it or not. But I've got two here for you. All right. And again, should you ever write these books, it's up to you. There's two. One is more military based. This is from something you said earlier. The first book title is The Dream Tour and How I Became an Abstract Failure. Your own words. That's one right there. But actually, I think the better one, you said it later, it's called 100 Cups of Coffee. That's the name of your book. I think that was a really, really great statement. I think a really unique one. Again, 2 cups per meeting, 50 meetings to build your network. That could be a great how-to guide. So 100 Cups of Coffee by Steve Jordon, or The Dream Tour and How I Became an Abstract Failure by Stephen Jordon. Either way, you're going to win on that. Maybe that's a sequel, but those are your book titles. Again, I take royalties. We can have that conversation when you publish it. Yeah, I'll let my publisher.
Right. Well, I'll take both those book titles, and in particular, it's just we're all a product of the lives that we lead. I think those couple of titles resonate pretty well with me. It's life after the military, to a degree, was and is more challenging than life in the military, despite the deployments and everything. It's because the decisions are all our own, and
Right.
maybe we've lost a bit of our network and support group, and that's why I'll just kind of go back to say it's really important to me, and I urge everyone to really pay attention to your network, your friendship group, particularly your close friendship group, because time can erode away those relationships, but it really doesn't take too much to refresh those and keep them around. And it's important not just to me, but I know it is to those in my network. So.
Steve, I think that's a great note to end on. You've been a phenomenal guest. Really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Howie. I've been delighted to share my story with you.
Well, you've brought a tremendous amount of value to our audience. And I just applaud you for everything you're doing. And I thank you for everything you're doing.
Terrific. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure is ours. And with that said, you've been listening to Life After the Military, which again is powered by Pivotal Moments Media. You can learn more about the organization at pivotalmoments.org. Go there. You'll get more inspirational content, educational content. You can donate. We have several channels across the board that we want you to check out. Appreciate those of you that supported us so far. So for Howie Cohen and Stephen Jordon, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes soon, wherever podcasts can be heard. Thanks so much for listening to Life After the Military, and we'll see you next time.